My Korean Mafia husband slept with my best friend on our wedding night. What I did next surprised him. The city of Seoul had never seen a wedding like this. Traffic was halted for miles. Black luxury sedans lined the streets like obedient soldiers, their engines humming low, patient, dangerous. Men in tailored suits stood at every corner, earpieces hidden, eyes sharp. Men who did not look like security, but like executioners waiting for permission to breathe. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a declaration of power. I stood in front of a floor-length mirror inside the private bridal suite of the Kang estate, my reflection staring back at me like a stranger dressed in white. The gown clung to me like a second skin, hand-stitched silk, imported lace, diamonds sewn so delicately they caught the light like captured stars. The dress was worth more than entire neighborhoods. Yet my hands were cold. Not from nerves. From understanding. Once I walked down that aisle there would be no turning back. The makeup artist dabbed under my eyes, careful, reverent, as if touching royalty. No one spoke unless spoken to. Even the stylist moved quietly, aware that this house belonged to Kang Jun-suk, the man I was about to marry. My soon-to-be husband. The Korean Mafia heir. The devil's soul whispered about but never named too loudly. I had seen fear before. I grew up learning how it smelled, how it changed people's voices, how it bent men twice my size into silence. But the fear surrounding Jun-suk was different. It wasn't loud. It didn't beg. It obeyed. A soft knock came at the door. "Mina is here," the attendant said. My best friend stepped in wearing a champagne-colored bridesmaid dress that hugged her perfectly. Her hair was styled in loose waves, her smile bright enough to convince anyone she was genuinely happy for me. "You look unreal," she said, breathless. "Like, untouchable." I smiled back. "So do you." She stepped closer, fixing my veil, her fingers lingering just a second too long. I noticed it, but dismissed the unease as pre-wedding jitters. Mina had been with me through everything. From university nights crying over failed dreams, to the day my family was threatened and I was forced to accept a marriage I never asked for. She was my anchor. Or so I believed. Outside the music began. The doors opened. The guests rose. And there he was. Kang Jun-suk stood at the altar, tall, immaculately dressed in a black suit that seemed molded to his body. His posture was relaxed, almost bored, but his presence pressed down on the room like gravity. His dark hair was swept back neatly, revealing sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes lifted when he saw me. Not soft. Not loving. Assessing. As if I were a chess piece finally placed where he intended. I took my first step forward. Each step down the aisle felt like crossing invisible lines. Lines of safety, innocence, freedom. The whispers followed me. That's her. The woman who married into the Kang family. The foreign bride. The sacrifice. I kept my chin high. If I was going to be offered to a monster, I would do it standing tall. When I reached him, Jun-suk leaned in just enough for me to hear his voice. "You're calm," he murmured. "Most women tremble." "I don't tremble," I replied quietly. "I adapt." Something flickered in his eyes. Interest, perhaps. Or amusement. The vows were spoken. The rings exchanged. Cameras flashed as the city's elite watched the union seal itself like a blood pact. When the officiant declared us husband and wife, applause filled the hall. Fireworks erupted outside. And just like that I became Mrs. Kang. At the reception, crystal chandeliers sparkled above tables overflowing with delicacies flown in from around the world. Politicians bowed their heads. Crime lords raised their glasses. Everyone wanted to be seen here. Everyone wanted to witness the woman who dared marry the Mafia king. Jun-suk barely touched me all night. His hand rested lightly at my back when cameras were near. His attention drifted constantly, to conversations, to power plays, to whispered deals made between sips of wine. I didn't mind. I wasn't expecting love. Only respect. Mina stayed close to us, laughing, charming the guests. I noticed how easily she fit into this world, how naturally she spoke to men I had learned to be wary of. How often Jun-suk's gaze drifted to her when she thought I wasn't watching. A warning bell rang faintly in my chest. But I ignored it. Because who suspects betrayal on their wedding day? When the night finally ended, the guests departed under a sky still glowing from fireworks. I was escorted to the bridal suite, heart pounding, not with excitement, but with anticipation of the unknown. This was it. The moment where my new life truly began. I waited. The room was silent except for the ticking clock and my own breathing. Minutes stretched. Then an hour. Jun-suk didn't come. I removed my veil. Sat on the edge of the bed. Told myself he was handling last-minute business. that this was normal. But deep down something twisted. Because I could hear laughter down the hall. Soft, familiar, and not meant for me. And in that moment, before I even stood up, before I followed the sound, I realized something was already wrong. Very wrong. And my wedding night was about to become the beginning of a war. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my ears until my thoughts grew too loud. The bridal suite felt enormous now, the king-sized bed untouched, the champagne on ice slowly losing its chill. The clock on the wall ticked with cruel precision, each second another reminder that I was alone on my own wedding night. Midnight came and went. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. I told myself not to overthink. Kang Jun-suk did not live by ordinary rules. Men like him treated time differently, minutes were expendable, people even more so. I had known that when I agreed to this marriage. Still, a strange unease crawled up my spine. I rose from the bed and walked barefoot across the cold marble floor, my gown whispering behind me. I opened the door just enough to peer into the hallway. It was dim, lit only by soft wall lamps. 2 guards stood at the far end, eyes forward, unmoving. "Is my husband still occupied?" I asked quietly. One of them bowed slightly. "He is attending to personal matters, madam." Personal. The word lingered. I closed the door, but the unease refused to leave. I tried to sit again, tried to breathe, but my chest felt tight. I reached up and removed my earrings, then my necklace, laying them carefully on the vanity like fragile promises already breaking. Then I heard it. Laughter. Soft, feminine, unmistakably familiar. It floated down the corridor like a ghost, light and careless, too intimate for business, too warm for strangers. My heart skipped once, hard enough to hurt. No, it couldn't be. I stepped into the hallway again, moving slowly, quietly. The guards did not stop me. Their eyes flickered briefly, uncertain, but they said nothing. The laughter came again. Closer now. It led me toward the guest wing. With each step, my pulse grew louder, drowning out reason. My hand brushed the wall for balance as 1,000 memories tried to convince me this was impossible. Mina wouldn't. Jun-suk wouldn't. Not tonight. I stopped in front of a door. Mina's door. Light spilled from beneath it. Shadows moved inside. The handle was cool beneath my fingers. Unlocked. For a moment I hesitated. A strange, desperate part of me hoped I was wrong, that I would open the door to nothing more than a misunderstanding I could laugh off later. I pushed it open. The world shattered. The room was filled with the warm glow of bedside lamps. My best friend sat on the edge of the bed, her hair loose, her cheeks flushed. Draped over her shoulders, carelessly, intimately, was my silk robe. The one monogrammed with my new initials. Standing beside her was Kang Jun-suk. He was buttoning his shirt. Calm, unrushed, composed. As if I had simply walked in on a meeting I wasn't invited to. Time slowed. My ears rang, my vision narrowing until all I could see was them, together, unashamed. Mina's eyes widened when she saw me, but she didn't move. She didn't cover herself. She didn't speak. Jun-suk looked up. His gaze met mine. And there it was. No guilt. No shock. Only mild annoyance. "You weren't supposed to see this so soon," he said flatly. The words hit harder than a slap. My throat closed. My heart pounded so violently I thought it might tear itself free. I searched his face, desperate for something, an apology, an explanation, even regret. There was nothing. Mina finally stood, clutching the robe tighter around herself. I can explain," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. My eyes stayed on my husband. On the man who had just humiliated me in the cruelest way possible. "On our wedding night?" I asked quietly. I barely recognized my own voice. It sounded distant, hollow. Jun-suk shrugged. "This marriage was never about romance. You knew that." "Yes," I said. "But betrayal was never part of the agreement." He stepped closer, towering over me. "Don't mistake clarity for cruelty. Mina understands her place. She doesn't demand what isn't hers." The words sliced deep. Mina flinched but said nothing. My chest burned. Tears threatened, but I forced them back. Crying would give them satisfaction. Crying would mean they had won. "So that's it?" I asked. "You take my best friend to bed and expect me to accept it?" Jun-suk's expression hardened. "You will accept it," he said, "because you are my wife, and because this marriage protects your family." There it was. The threat wrapped in silk. I laughed then. A soft, broken sound that surprised even me. "I see," I said, nodding slowly. Thank you for being honest. Mina reached for me. Please don't hate me. I raised a hand, stopping her. I finally looked at her then, really looked. The girl I had trusted, confided in, loved like a sister. She couldn't meet my eyes. I don't hate you, I said. And that was the truth. Hate required emotion. What I felt was colder. I turned back to Junsook. Enjoy your night, I said softly. Both of you. Then I walked out. My legs trembled, but I didn't stop. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I returned to the bridal suite alone, closing the door gently behind me as if nothing had happened. Inside, the room felt different now, tainted. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The bride stared back at me, eyes too bright, lips too pale. Something inside me shifted. Crack. And then hardened. If Kang Junsook thought I would break, he had made his first and most dangerous mistake. Because as I lay down alone on my wedding night, listening to the distant hum of a house that no longer felt like mine, I made a silent vow of my own. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would not leave. I would learn. And when the time came, I would make them both regret underestimating the woman they had just betrayed. Morning came without mercy. Sunlight slipped through the sheer curtains of the bridal suite, painting the marble floor in soft gold, too gentle for the violence that had torn through me hours earlier. I lay awake long before the light arrived, staring at the ceiling, my body still dressed in yesterday's gown, my mind replaying the scene behind that unlocked door again and again. But there were no tears. That surprised me the most. I had expected sobs, shaking, the kind of grief that left you hollow and screaming into pillows. Instead, there was only a steady, numbing calm, like the moment after a storm when the air goes still and dangerous. I rose slowly and washed my face, studying my reflection. I looked unchanged. And that was when I understood something important. If I could look normal after a betrayal like that, then I could survive anything. A knock came at the door. Madam, a maid said softly. Breakfast is being served. I nodded. I'll be down shortly. I changed into a simple, elegant dress, black, modest, powerful. I tied my hair back neatly, applied minimal makeup, and placed the wedding ring back on my finger. Not because I respected the marriage, but because I respected the game. When I entered the dining hall, every conversation paused. Kang Junsook sat at the head of the table, relaxed, already dressed for the day. Mina sat a few seats away, wearing a pale blue dress and an uneasy smile. They both looked up. I smiled first. Good morning, I said pleasantly. Junsook's eyebrow lifted slightly. Mina's shoulders loosened as if she had been holding her breath all night. I took my seat beside my husband and poured myself tea. How did you sleep? Junsook asked casually. Peacefully, I replied. You? Productive, he said. Mina choked slightly on her coffee. I placed a hand on hers. Careful, I said gently. It's hot. Her eyes widened, searching my face for signs of anger, pain, accusation. She found none. And that unsettled her more than any scream ever could. From that morning on, I became exactly what they expected. And exactly what they would later fear. I accompanied Junsook to formal events, standing silently at his side as men bowed and women whispered. I learned which elders demanded respect and which demanded obedience. I observed who spoke first, who interrupted, who stayed silent when Junsook entered the room. Silence, I learned quickly, was power. The staff began to watch me differently. Not with pity but with curiosity. The guards stopped underestimating me. The maids reported things without being asked. Because I listened. I listened when they forgot I was there. I listened when Junsook spoke on the phone in Korean, thinking I didn't understand every word. Years earlier, I had learned the language in secret, never imagining how useful it would become. Transfer the funds through the Busan accounts, he said one night. Keep the offshore ledger separate. Make sure the elders don't see this one. I memorized everything. At night, Junsook didn't come to my bed. And I didn't ask him to. Instead, I studied. The Kang estate was a fortress, but even fortresses had cracks. I learned which rooms were monitored and which weren't. Which men were loyal to the name and which were loyal to the money. Mina, meanwhile, grew bolder. She walked through the estate as if she belonged there. She wore jewelry Junsook had given her openly now, no longer hiding the glint of diamonds at her throat. Sometimes she tried to speak to me alone. You're handling this well, she said once in the garden. I smiled faintly. Am I? You don't seem angry. I am not angry, I replied. Anger clouds judgment. She laughed nervously. You've changed. Yes, I said. Marriage does that. What I didn't say was this. Betrayal does it faster. Behind closed doors I began building quiet alliances. One of the senior accountants noticed I never asked unnecessary questions. Another appreciated that I remembered his daughter's name. The head of security realized I knew the estate better than some of his men. One by one they began to report to me. Not officially, but carefully. Jun-suk didn't notice at first. He was used to being obeyed. Used to women either clinging or crumbling. He mistook my silence for submission. One evening, as he loosened his tie in our shared bedroom, he glanced at me. "You're adapting well," he said. "This arrangement suits you." I met his gaze calmly. "It suits me for now." "For now?" he repeated, amused. "Yes," I said softly. He laughed, dismissing it. That laughter would haunt him later. Because while he slept peacefully in his certainty, I was awake, mapping his empire in my mind, memorizing the foundations, the load-bearing walls. Amina? She mistook my kindness for forgiveness. She began to speak of the future. Of traveling with him. Of being by his side openly one day. I let her talk. I even smiled. Because the most dangerous woman in a mafia house is not the one who screams. It is the one who watches. And by the end of that week, I was no longer just Kang Jun-suk's wife. I was becoming something else entirely. Someone who understood the rules. And was preparing to rewrite them. Power never announces itself. It arrives quietly, settles into the room, and waits for everyone else to realize it's already too late. By the time I decided to host the dinner, the Kang estate had begun to breathe differently around me. Servants paused when I entered a room. Guards straightened instinctively. Conversations softened, not out of fear but calculation. They were measuring me, and I welcomed it. I planned the dinner meticulously. Not lavish. Not excessive. That would have been expected. Instead, I chose intentional. 12 guests. No more, no less. The core elders of the Kang organization. Men who had survived coups, wars, and betrayals. Men who did not care about love stories or wedding scandals. They cared about stability and control. When I informed Jun-suk of the dinner, he barely looked up from his phone. "You're hosting?" he asked mildly. "Yes," I replied. "It's time I play my role properly." A slow smile curved his lips. "Good. Let them see you're adjusting." Adjusting. I hid my smile behind my teacup. Mina, on the other hand, was delighted. "This is huge," she said excitedly when she heard. "They'll finally see you as, well, useful." Useful. The word didn't sting anymore. I had learned to sharpen such insults into weapons. The night of the dinner arrived wrapped in quiet tension. The dining hall was illuminated by soft golden light. Crystal glasses gleamed. The table was set with precision, each seat chosen carefully, each placement deliberate. I wore deep emerald silk, understated yet commanding. No diamonds. No distractions. When the elders arrived, I greeted each personally. Chairman Park, who valued tradition. Elder Seo, whose loyalty was bought, not earned. Vice Chairman Han, who watched everything and spoke little. They studied me closely as they took their seats. Jun-suk entered last, confident, unhurried, dressed in black. Mina followed behind him, radiant and unashamed, her presence a quiet provocation. I noticed everything. Dinner began smoothly. Polite conversation. Light laughter. Business masked as socializing. I let it flow. I listened more than I spoke. Then halfway through the meal I stood. "I want to thank you all," I said calmly, my voice steady, "for honoring my invitation." The room quieted. "This family has welcomed me, generously," I continued. "And as Kang Jun-suk's wife, I believe transparency is the foundation of trust." Jun-suk glanced at me, mildly curious. A server pressed a button. The walls lit up. Screens, hidden seamlessly into the decor, flickered to life. Numbers appeared. Documents. Transactions. At first, the elders leaned forward with interest. Then confusion. Then alarm. Jun-suk stood abruptly. "Turn that off." I didn't look at him. "These are offshore accounts," I explained, "diverting funds without elder approval. These," I gestured to another screen, "are unsanctioned arms transfers." A murmur rippled through the room. Elder Seo's face darkened. "These deals were not disclosed." "No," I agreed. "They weren't." Jun-suk's voice dropped dangerously low. "Enough." I turned to face him then. "Sit down," I said softly. The room froze. No one had spoken to Kang Jun-suk like that in years. To my surprise, and everyone else's, he hesitated. Then slowly he sat. Mina's face had gone pale. "I had access to these accounts as your wife," I continued calmly, and I took the liberty of understanding them. Chairman Park's gaze sharpened. Why reveal this now? I met his eyes without flinching. Because hidden fractures destroy families faster than enemies do. I changed the slide. Messages appeared. Recorded conversations. Names of allies who had been bypassed. These actions, I said, risk internal collapse. And collapse invites outsiders. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Jun-suk's jaw tightened. You're overstepping. No, Vice Chairman Han said quietly. She's preventing a war. All eyes turned to him. She speaks truth, he continued. These moves endangered us. I let the silence stretch. Then I said the final thing I had planned. I am not here to overthrow my husband, I said gently. I am here to stabilize what he has complicated. Complicated. A polite word for reckless. The elders exchanged looks. Chairman Park leaned back slowly. What do you propose? I breathed once. Shared authority, I replied. Temporary. Oversight. Transparency. Jun-suk laughed harshly. You think they'll side with you? I turned to him. I don't think. I prepared. The vote was swift. Unanimous. From that moment on, no major decision could be made without my approval. Mina looked like she might faint. After the elders left, Jun-suk confronted me in the empty hall. You planned this, he said, fury simmering beneath his calm. Yes, I replied. You humiliated me. I met his gaze. You humiliated me first. On our wedding night. For the first time he had no response. That night as I returned to my room alone, the estate felt different. Quieter. Heavier. As if the walls themselves understood that something fundamental had shifted. Power had changed hands. And everyone could feel it. Power reveals people. Not slowly. Not gently. It strips them bare. The morning after the dinner, the Kong estate woke up different. Not louder. Not chaotic. Sharper. The servants moved with deliberate precision. Guards avoided unnecessary eye contact with Jun-suk and bowed slightly deeper to me. Phones rang more often. Doors closed more quietly. The hierarchy had not collapsed, but it had tilted. And Mina felt it before anyone else. She sought me out before breakfast, intercepting me near the winter garden where pale sunlight filtered through glass walls and cast long shadows across the marble floor. You embarrassed him, she said, her voice tight, controlled. I stopped walking. Turned slowly. I corrected an imbalance, I replied. Her nails dug into her palm. You did this to punish us. I studied her face, the faint tension around her eyes, the carefully masked fear. For the first time since I had known her, Mina did not look confident. You punished yourself, I said calmly. I simply stopped protecting you from consequences. She laughed, but it sounded brittle. You're acting like you won. I haven't won, I replied. I've stabilized. That word again. It seemed to haunt everyone now. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You think the elders care about you? They'll discard you the moment you're inconvenient. I leaned in slightly, my tone soft. That's true. But they'll discard you first. Her breath hitched. And just like that, the balance between us snapped. From that moment on, Mina began to unravel. She made mistakes, small at first. Speaking out of turn in meetings she had no right to attend. Wearing jewelry too flashy, too visible, as if trying to reclaim relevance through display. She tried to assert influence she no longer possessed. And people noticed. The guards no longer stepped aside for her automatically. The servants stopped prioritizing her requests. Invitations stopped coming. Jun-suk noticed too. He grew colder toward her, not out of loyalty to me but irritation. Mina had been a convenience. Now she was a complication. I watched it all quietly. I did nothing. That was the cruelest part. One evening, word reached me that Mina planned to leave the estate. Not permanently. Just temporarily. Temporary escapes were dangerous in this world. They suggested instability, weakness, disloyalty. I didn't stop her. Instead, I made sure she was followed. She didn't notice the black sedan until it was too late. They brought her back just after midnight. She was escorted, not dragged, into the garden where lanterns glowed softly between rose bushes. The air smelled sweet, deceptive. I was already there. She froze when she saw me. I didn't do anything wrong, she said quickly. I just needed air. You needed leverage, I replied. Her eyes darted toward the guards. Please. Tell them to leave. They won't, I said. This conversation requires witnesses. Her voice cracked. Why are you doing this? I stepped closer, stopping just short of her personal space. Because you misunderstood the nature of your position, I said calmly. You thought proximity to power meant protection. It did, she whispered. Only until it didn't. I gestured slightly. A man stepped forward and placed a thin folder into my hands. Inside were documents, travel records, financial transfers, conversations she never knew were monitored. I handed the folder to her. She flipped through it, her hands shaking. You were never subtle, I said. You were just ignored. She dropped the folder. Tears welled in her eyes now. I loved him. That was your first mistake, I replied. Love is a liability here. Her knees weakened. What happens to me now? I studied her carefully. Once she had been my closest friend. My sister in everything but blood. The woman who knew my fears, my dreams, my weakest moments. And yet, she had chosen betrayal without hesitation. I won't harm you, I said. Hope flickered across her face. I won't threaten you, I continued. Her breath steadied. I won't even raise my voice. She swallowed. Then, what? I leaned closer, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm going to give you exactly what you wanted. Confusion crossed her features. Freedom, I said. I straightened. By sunrise you will leave Seoul. You will take nothing that belongs to the Kang family. No money. No jewelry. No protection. Her face drained of color. You can't do that. I already have. She turned desperately toward the guards. Jun-suk wouldn't allow this. He already has, I said. That was the moment she broke. She sank to her knees, sobbing, clutching at the grass. Please, she cried. I'll disappear. I won't cause trouble. I know, I said gently. That's the point. She was escorted away quietly. No screams. No blood. No spectacle. By morning Mina was gone. Her name erased from guest lists. Her number disconnected. Her existence reduced to rumor. And the estate exhaled. Later that day Jun-suk confronted me. You exiled her, he said flatly. Yes. You didn't ask me. No. He stared at me for a long moment, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. She mattered to you, he said. I met his gaze. So did I. For the first time he had nothing to counter with. That night, alone in my room, I stood by the window and watched the city lights flicker below. I felt no triumph. No satisfaction. Only clarity. Because the truth had settled deep in my bones. I had not taken revenge. I had taken my place. And anyone who stood in the way, friend or lover, would fall just as quietly. Fear changes a man long before he admits it exists. In Kang Jun-suk it appeared subtly. Not in his posture. He still walked like the ground belonged to him. Not in his voice, still calm, controlled, lethal when needed. It appeared in his eyes. He began to watch me. Where once he had dismissed my presence as decorative, he now measured every word I spoke, every meeting I attended, every silence I allowed to linger. He no longer assumed he knew what I was thinking. And that unsettled him more than open defiance ever could. The elders began calling for me first. Not openly, never disrespectfully, but subtly. Madame Kang has a sharper sense of logistics. She understands balance. She sees beyond pride. Each compliment was a blade wrapped in silk. Jun-suk heard them all. At first, he tried to reassert control the way men like him always did, through authority. You don't need to attend this meeting, he said one morning, adjusting his cufflinks. It's operational. I looked up from my tea. I already reviewed the reports. They don't concern you. They concern the family, I replied. So they concern me. He paused. That pause became familiar. He began issuing orders only to have them quietly reviewed. Adjusted. Sometimes reversed, politely, with reason, with elder support. Never publicly. Never messily. Always in ways that made resistance look irrational. The guards noticed. So did the lieutenants. When conflicts arose between my instructions and his, they hesitated. And hesitation in this world was power-shifting shape. One evening Jun-suk confronted me in his private office. The door closed with a decisive click. You're turning them against me, he said. I remained standing, calm. No. I'm preventing them from turning against us. He scoffed. You enjoy this. I endure it, I corrected. There's a difference. He stepped closer, looming. Once, that would have intimidated me. Now it felt predictable. You think because you exposed a few accounts you control me? He said quietly. I met his gaze without blinking. No. I think because you underestimated me you lost the advantage. Silence fell between us. Not explosive. Heavy. You could have left, he said suddenly. After that night. Yes, I agreed. Why didn't you? I studied him carefully. Because this was the first honest question he had asked me since we married. Because leaving would have made me a victim, I said. And staying made me a variable. His jaw tightened. That was when I saw it clearly. Jun-suk did not fear losing his empire. He feared losing control of the narrative. He had built his life on dominance, on being the inevitable outcome of every conflict. I had disrupted that by becoming unpredictable, by becoming necessary. That night, for the first time, he came to my room. Not to touch me. To talk. He sat across from me, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. You've changed the balance, he said. The elders trust you. They trust stability, I replied. I represent that now. And what do I represent? He asked. The question surprised me. You represent force, I said honestly. And force without restraint invites rebellion. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his thumb along the rim of the glass. You sound like them. I learned from watching you, I said. A bitter smile flickered across his lips. You're dangerous, he said softly. I returned the smile. You taught me. From that point on, our marriage shifted into something neither of us had anticipated. We were no longer husband and wife in any traditional sense. We were rivals bound by law. Allies bound by necessity. Some nights, tension crackled between us. Unspoken, sharp, almost combustible. Not desire. Not hatred. Recognition. The recognition of equals forced into proximity. He began to ask my opinion, framed as commands, softened as suggestions. I gave it, when it benefited the family. When it didn't, I said nothing. And that silence unnerved him more than opposition ever had. One afternoon, Vice Chairman Han spoke plainly during a council meeting. Madam Kang should be named co-head, he said. Formally. The room stilled. Jun-suk said nothing. I watched him carefully as the elders debated. His face revealed nothing, but his hands were clenched beneath the table. When the decision was finalized, it was unanimous. Shared leadership. Checks and balance. A structure that prevented tyranny. When the meeting ended, Jun-suk lingered behind. They've tied my hands, he said quietly. I met his gaze. No. They've ensured your survival. He laughed once, low, humorless. You really believe that? I do, I said. Because if they hadn't, I would have replaced you. The words hung between us, dangerous, honest. He stared at me, searching for a bluff. There was none. That was the moment it happened. The moment Kang Jun-suk, feared across Seoul, finally understood the truth. The woman he had betrayed on his wedding night was now the only reason he still sat on his throne. And that realization? That was fear. Not the kind that makes men run. The kind that makes them careful. The kind that makes them listen. The kind that keeps them awake at night, wondering whether the person beside them is their greatest protection, or the architect of their downfall. Power, once claimed, demands a final shape. Not chaos. Not vengeance. Definition. Months passed after the elders' decision, and Seoul adjusted the way cities always do, quietly, instinctively. Rumors traveled faster than facts. Whispers replaced headlines. The Kang organization was still feared, still untouchable, but the fear had refined itself. It was no longer just Kang Jun-suk's shadow people feared. It was mine. I did not announce my authority. I didn't need to. Authority recognizes itself when people start waiting for your approval without being told to. Meetings began on time now. Transactions were cleaner. Borders held. Where Jun-suk ruled with intimidation, I ruled with inevitability. And he noticed. We rarely argued anymore. Arguments were emotional. Wasteful. Instead, we circled each other with sharp politeness, exchanging information, testing boundaries, acknowledging limits neither of us could cross without consequence. Some nights we shared the same room. Not the same bed. We spoke then, quietly, honestly, without witnesses or weapons. You never tried to destroy me, he said once, staring out the window at the city. You could have. Yes, I replied. Why didn't you? I considered the question carefully. Because destruction is easy, I said. Building something that lasts requires restraint. He exhaled slowly. You would have made a terrifying enemy. I know, I said. That's why I chose not to be one. That night something shifted again. Not toward love. Toward respect. The kind forged when two predators recognize each other's limits. The elders watched us closely, expecting a final rupture. Divorce, bloodshed, a quiet assassination disguised as fate. It never came. Instead, I made a move no one predicted. I called for a public council. Not violent. Not dramatic. Transparent. I will not replace my husband, I told them calmly. And I will not be replaced. The room held its breath. This family will not be ruled by ego, I continued. It will be ruled by balance. I introduced reforms, slow, surgical changes that ensured no single hand could strangle the empire again. Financial oversight. Succession contingencies. Protections for internal dissent. I was building something that could survive even me. That terrified them more than tyranny ever could. After the council, Jun-suk stopped me in the corridor. You're dismantling your own leverage, he said quietly. No, I replied. I'm proving I don't need it. He studied me for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he bowed his head. Just slightly. Not submission. Acknowledgement. The city noticed soon after. Articles appeared, carefully worded, anonymous. A new era for the Kong family. Stability after years of unchecked dominance. They never mentioned my name. They didn't have to. As for Mina, she became a rumor. A cautionary tale whispered by women who thought proximity to power meant immunity. Some said she fled abroad. Others claimed she married beneath her ambition and lived quietly, haunted by what she almost had. I never searched for her. She was no longer relevant. One evening, months later, I stood alone on the balcony overlooking Seoul, the city breathing beneath me. Jun-suk joined me, standing at a respectful distance. You won, he said. I shook my head. No. I endured. He glanced at me. What are we now? I turned to face him fully. We are married, I said. By law. By optics. By choice. Choice? He echoed. Yes, I said calmly. Because I stay not out of fear. Not out of obligation. He waited. I stay because I am untouchable here, I finished. And so long as you remember that this arrangement works. A faint smile curved his lips. You're not my wife, he said softly. I met his gaze, unflinching. I'm your consequence. Silence settled between us, not hostile, not tender. The world would never know what truly happened on our wedding night. They would only see the outcome. A mafia king who ruled more carefully. An empire that stopped bleeding from the inside. And a woman who didn't leave after betrayal. Not because she forgave, but because she transcended. And that was the ending no one expected.